Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Once again, we will be exploring true horror stories taken directly from various Reddit pages. For those who are new to the channel, I will be adding software to my voice to make it a little scarier, so don't be confused when I sound a little different. If you guys enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe, it really does help the channel grow. Without further ado, let's get started.
My dad said we never had an attic, but I knew he was lying. It all started in 2012. Following my 5-year-old brother's death. Grief made itself at home in the deep wound left by the loss of our mother only 3 years earlier. I was only 9 years old, too young to endure such agony. Then again, I don't know whether anybody would be able to bear what I've seen and felt. After Eric passed, it was just Dad and me. But I felt, in a way, as if I'd buried my father too, or at least buried the version of him I had once known. Eric's funeral seemed to break him. In fairness, my father has always been inward and reclusive, but he became worse after my brother died. Some nights he'd leave my dinner on the table, then I wouldn't see him until the morning. I miss Eric, I tearfully confessed one evening, and Dad simply replied, "We need to move on, Lorna." Maybe that would have been easier if I hadn't felt so isolated. Knowing what I know now, however, I wonder whether I should be thankful. I was a meek child, and trauma has left me a meeker adult. The meek go unnoticed, and that may well have saved me. At some point in late 2012, I spent the weekend with my grandparents, and when I returned, I immediately noticed quite a pronounced difference in the house. "Where is it?" I asked as I lugged my suitcase across the upstairs landing. "Where's what?" my dad asked in a flat tone. I nodded my head at the white plaster on the ceiling above. "The attic door." He frowned. "We don't have an attic, Lorna." I rolled my eyes. "Very funny, Dad. What's between the ceiling and the roof, then?" "That space is structural," my father said softly. "It's not accessible." That made no sense to me, but I was young. Too young to question my parents' supposed wisdom. Of course, I knew the attic door had existed, but I assumed that Dad had been playing a practical joke. That filled me hope. Hope that for the first time in many months, his sense of humor may have returned. Still, as the years went by and the attic door remained only in my assured memory, I began to feel quite uneasy. I hated walking underneath that ceiling and seeing only white, rather than the wooden door which had once been there. Maybe I would have eventually got over it, would have come to believe that I'd simply misremembered my childhood, if it hadn't been for my dad's conviction that I'd lost my mind. A strange, abrasive conviction. He always seemed to be on the verge of losing his patience. Still, Dad promised that there was nothing but foam, wood, and wiring chases in the space between the second-floor ceiling and the property's sloping roof above. No space for a proper attic, according to him. Anyhow, by the time I entered my teenage years, I'd stopped asking about the loft space from my childhood. Stopped caring, truth be told. I became buried in school, then college, then university. All the while, I drifted farther and farther away from Dad. And that came down to more than the ceiling. Our relationship has only become more strained as the years have gone by, and the same is true of every relationship my father forms. He broke up with Jenna just before Christmas, which turned him cold and standoffish. I've never liked him in that state, and admittedly I missed Jenna. She'd been somewhat of a warm, comforting presence in the house for the past 4 years. In spite of this, the first alarm bell only started ringing this morning. Around 3 in the morning, to be exact. A few hours before I needed to get up for work, I was woken by a series of noises. They came from above. 3 weighty, board-buckling creaks. It wasn't the sound of the ceiling settling, wasn't the sound of rats burrowing through those supposed wiring chases in the inaccessible loft space. Rather, it was sound that confirmed what I'd always known. Something was moving around above me, in the very real attic. But I didn't call out, didn't investigate. Instead, I clung to the edge of my sweaty duvet and lay silently, swallowing the shriek that wanted to escape. I've mastered the art of burying fear. Part of me knew that to call out would be a very, very unwise idea. The part of me that has been suppressing things since I was old enough to remember them. The things that happened even whilst Eric and Mum were alive. I remember the set of eyeballs that would watch me from the crack in my ajar bedroom door. Sometimes I'd wake during the night and see them disappear into the black. I remember the time Dad stood and watched as I, barely more than a toddler, flailed helplessly in a swimming pool. I'm sure I've forgotten worse things, but I'll never forget what I saw this morning. This morning, something possessed me. Some new source of courage, or more likely, delirium. My dad went to work, and I had time before my shift, so I went into the garage, fetched a sizable hammer, and returned to the upstairs landing. I took to the ceiling with a series of swings, tearing a hole through the white plaster with alarming ease. At first, I thought I'd underestimated my own strength, but then I realized there'd been next to nothing in the form of resistance from the ceiling. Nothing to prevent my remodeling project. I spat plaster and dust from my wide mouth. Then I eyeballed the black abyss above me. I knew it. I'd known it for 13 years. The space above the second floor wasn't filled with piles of foam and wooden beams and wires. It was a black, empty void. There was, and always had been, room up there. There had always been an attic. Part of me wants to end here, but I'm currently sitting in a police station, trying to keep my mind off everything, so I'm going to tell you what I told them. I set up a ladder on the landing, climbed into the attic, then lit the space with my phone torch. Now, I don't know how the loft space used to look. After all, I hardly had reason to go up there as a 9-year-old. However, whatever purpose it once served, it serves a new one now. I hurled my guts across the floorboards when my light caught the first of the bodies. A woman was bundled up in a large, translucent plastic bag, a maggot-filled bag. The remaining flesh of her bloody face was peeling away to reveal a wide-mouthed skull, but enough features remained to identify her. It was Jenna. As I moved the torch beam, I nearly lost my footing on the ladder. I wasn't horrified by the sight of Jenna, not even by the sight of the many other plastic-wrapped corpses, some little more than ashes in tattered clothes. I wobbled in fear when I saw the shrine, for lack of a better word, near the back of the attic. Surrounded by fresh burning candles were 2 long, rectangular wooden crates. Crates with what seemed to be sturdy lids and brass clasps. These were no crates. I know that. About half an hour ago, an officer informed me that my father hadn't returned home. They haven't found him. Sooner or later, I have to leave this place, but I don't want to do that. I'm terrified. I should feel safe, apparently. The police officers have promised to get me far away from here. They've promised to watch me, to protect me. They promised not to let me out of their sight. How on earth will they keep that promise? Nobody's ever stopped my father from making things disappear before.